Everything you believe about yourself is a story. Your childhood, your biggest failure, the person you think you are. None of these exist inside your brain as perfect recordings. Every time you remember them, your brain quietly rewrites them into a narrative that makes sense. Now ask yourself something even stranger. What if stories aren't something humans invented? What if stories invented humans? That sounds impossible. But every civilization that has ever existed tells stories. It didn't matter whether they lived in the frozen Arctic, deep African forests, isolated Pacific islands, or deserts where civilizations rose and disappeared. They all did the same thing. They created myths, legends, heroes, monsters, origin stories. Not occasionally, constantly. That's the real mystery. The question isn't why humans enjoy stories. The question is, why does every human brain seem unable to live without them? For decades, scientists believed language evolved so humans could exchange information more efficiently. But one anthropologist challenged that entire idea. In 1996, British anthropologist Robin Dunbar proposed something radical. Language didn't evolve mainly to explain the world. It evolved to explain people. Imagine living in a tribe 200,000 years ago. Someone stole food. Someone lied. Someone betrayed the group. Someone risked their life to save everyone else. If nobody could tell those stories, trust would collapse. Long before language became a tool for logic, it became a tool for survival. Dunbar called this vocal grooming. Just as monkeys strengthen relationships by grooming each other, humans strengthened relationships by exchanging stories. A single conversation could spread trust, expose deception, warn others, or unite an entire group around one shared belief. Stories became social glue, and without that glue, large human societies may never have existed. But here's where the science becomes even stranger. Maybe stories don't just connect groups, maybe they temporarily connect brains. In 2010, neuroscientist Hasson at Princeton University asked one person to tell a real personal story while another person simply listened inside an fMRI brain scanner. The results surprised even the researchers. The listener's brain didn't just hear the story, it began activating in almost the exact same pattern as the storyteller's brain, region by region, moment by moment. It was as if one mind was quietly recreating another person's experience. Not perfectly, but remarkably close. Think about what that means. Right now, while you're listening to these words, your brain isn't collecting information, it's building an experience. And if that experience breaks, something fascinating happens. If that shared experience breaks, the connection disappears. Hasson noticed something just as important as the synchronization itself. Whenever the listener stopped understanding the story, their brain stopped mirroring the speakers. The two minds drifted apart. That revealed something profound. Your brain wasn't designed to absorb facts. It was designed to simulate experiences. A list of survival rules is easy to forget, but a story about someone who ignored those rules can stay in your memory for decades. For your ancestors, that difference could mean life or death. A child who heard, "Never walk near the river," might ignore the warning, but a child who heard, "A boy disappeared into that river and never returned," would remember it forever. Stories don't simply deliver information. They transform information into experience, and experience changes behavior. But there's another layer, one that's even more unsettling. In 2000, psychologists Melanie and Timothy Brock published one of the most influential studies on storytelling. They introduced a concept called narrative transportation. Their question was surprisingly simple. What happens when someone becomes completely absorbed in a story? The answer wasn't what they expected. The deeper people became immersed in a narrative, their critical thinking became quieter. Not because they became less intelligent, but because the brain temporarily stopped treating the story like an argument. Instead, it treated it like reality. Even when participants knew the story was fictional, its ideas, values, and emotions slipped into their thinking more easily than ordinary facts ever could. Think about that. Your brain lowers its defenses not when someone argues with you, but when someone tells you a story. That sounds dangerous, because it is. Stories can teach compassion, but they can also spread fear. They can preserve wisdom or manipulate entire societies. Your human brain evolved to trust stories long before it evolved to question them. And there was a reason for that. For almost all of human history, stories weren't just entertainment, they were survival manuals. There were no schools, no textbooks, no internet. Knowledge had only one reliable vehicle: narrative. Every warning about poisonous plants, every lesson about betrayal, every hunting strategy, every moral that held a tribe together had to survive in human memory. Stories were the technology that carried those lessons across generations. Without them, each generation would have started from zero. But stories don't just change what you believe, they change what your body feels. And that's where the science becomes almost unbelievable. Neuroeconomist Paul Zak wanted to know why some stories move us to tears, while others leave us completely cold. So instead of asking people how they felt, his team measured what was happening inside their bodies. The results revealed that a powerful story doesn't just live in your imagination, it quietly changes your biology. Paul Zak's team discovered something remarkable. When people watched a story centered on real human struggles, their brains released oxytocin, a chemical closely linked to trust, empathy, and human connection. The more emotionally invested someone became, the more oxytocin their body produced. And something even stranger happened afterwards. People who experienced the strongest emotional response were significantly more likely to help a stranger, donate money, or act generously. A story didn't just change what they felt, it changed what they did. Because your brain doesn't treat every story equally. Tension captures your attention. Emotion builds connection. Resolution gives meaning. A well-told story isn't just entertainment, it's a biological sequence your brain has been practicing for hundreds of thousands of years. But perhaps the strangest discovery of all is that stories don't stop when someone finishes telling them. They continue inside your own mind. Literary scholar Jonathan Gottschall argued that humans are not simply consumers of stories, we are story-generating machines. Think about your dreams. Every night, your brain creates characters, conflicts, places, and conversations without anyone writing a script. When you're alone, your mind drifts into imaginary conversations. When something confusing happens, your brain immediately begins searching for an explanation, and if it can't find one, it creates one. Not because your brain enjoys fiction, but because uncertainty is psychologically uncomfortable. A story, even an imperfect one, often feels safer than no story at all. That's why children naturally invent imaginary worlds, why adults replay conversations that never happened, why entire civilizations built myths to explain the stars long before they understood astronomy. Your brain doesn't wait for stories, it manufactures them. Maybe that's because stories were never just entertainment, they were simulations, safe places where our ancestors could rehearse danger, understand betrayal, practice courage, and imagine the future without paying the real-world cost of failure. In many ways, every story is a survival simulator. Which brings us back to the original question, why do humans need stories to survive? Because survival was never only about finding food or escaping predators. It was about learning without dying, trusting the right people, remembering lessons across generations, keeping thousands of individuals united by the same